Welcome, everyone. A message of hope today around a very difficult topic, that of widowhood and all that comes with it. And personally, as I was just saying to Cindy, I have more friends than I thought of my age or younger, and I'm 56, who are already widowed. So welcome to Cindy Burns, life coach to the widowed, and I just thought also life and grief coach, which sounds like such a beautiful thing to have. So Cindy, I'm delighted to have you. Can you please start with telling us a little bit about yourself, maybe where you are and what you do, but also why? How did you come to being this coach for the widowed?
I live in Virginia in the US, and I became widowed when I was 54, and I'm 66 now. I didn't know any other widows
Yes.
except for my mother,
Yes.
and I felt very alone, and I wasn't really aware. I was on Facebook at the time, but I wasn't aware of like the groups for widows
Yes.
and things, and my church didn't have a special like a grief
Yeah,
community
counseling
or
group.
anything. Yeah, so I kind of grieved alone. I mean, I have 6 grown sons, and 2 of them live with me, and another one lives in the same area. And I didn't want them to worry about me. So I didn't show them my grief, which I actually was doing them a disservice because they wanted to care for me. They wanted to take care of me,
Yeah.
and I didn't allow that.
Yeah.
So,
The mother's instinct, I suppose, right?
yes, it is. It is.
Mm.
It doesn't matter how old your children are, you
Mm.
still want to be strong for them.
Yeah,
And
yeah. And there you want to help them with their grief, but then who's
yes,
there for you and yours? That's a very clever point that you said also about the fact that, when there's no people of your age around, it's different. Like divorce is a nasty thing as well, but there are so many around you that you can find at least a friend. And the groups, it also seems like something very public, to be able to even put your grief out there. I remember a friend of mine about 10 years back. That's how I actually found out that her daughter had passed very young in a very nasty way. But I was surprised at first about, actually putting it out there in the public until I realized she needed this. She needed to talk about it. She needed people to not look away from her when she passed because they didn't know how to cope with her. She wanted people to be with her.
yes, and we need people to support us, but the vast majority of widows or anybody who's lost somebody, we don't ask for support. We kind of withdraw.
Why is that, you think?
I don't, because it feels so very personal and private.
Yes.
And then all of a sudden we realize that all of our friends are gone because we pushed them away or
Right.
because we withdrew from them.
Yeah.
So it's very isolating, and our emotions are right up at the very top. So we're hurt very easily.
Yeah.
And so when a friend or a family member backs off to give us space, or because they don't know quite how to be around us, so they just kind of back away, we take that so personally. We take
Right.
it as, they don't care for us anymore. All we really have to do is reach out to them.
Yeah.
And so part of my message is, don't isolate yourself, don't back
Right.
off, don't
Right.
wait for them to contact you, because the phone works both ways.
Right.
And
I
my
guess
mother
there are
told me
different
so.
phases, right? Because I was actually saying to you offline, but I'll say it online as well. I mean, recently, 2 months ago, we're very close friends. He died, and I'm in contact with the widow. And I think you go through various phases, right? We don't know what to do. We're a bit like, okay, I can imagine she's in this with her children and doesn't want people that, apart from her really, really closest. I don't know if it's because we're uncomfortable with grief. That was a message that I learned even at university when a friend of mine, her father passed, and we all tried to jolly Virginia along the whole time. And then a few years later, another friend of ours lost her father as well. And Virginia said to me, don't make that same mistake. And I was like, what mistake? And she said, I wanted to cry, I didn't want you all to be, let's think of something fun to take Virginia's, mind off it. I couldn't take my mind off it. My father had gone, and that was really a big lesson for me, which I've never forgotten. I've never forgotten. I think, it's about the other person. Put your own uncomfort aside, and you don't need to force them to talk if they don't want to, and you don't need to, but just say, and that's what I suppose I've been trying to do with this friend, who isn't the closest of friends, but for whom I feel very deeply. And sort of say, how can I help you on a day-to-day basis? Some days she does want to be distracted and go for a walk or whatsoever, or to think that life might one day, be recreatable, that it won't just be in shatters around her. But at other days she doesn't, or some days she does want to cry, or some days she does want to go over exactly what happened, how she found him, as in a way to almost work it out of her system. And same thing like what you said, and I'd never really thought about that before. She has 3 children, of which the youngest is 16, and she's there for them.
Yeah.
She's there for them, and it's like a double grief, because she's grieving for her husband who is no more, and who was really, they were a very symbiotic couple. And at the same time, she's grieving for her children who have lost their father a lot earlier than, anybody would have wanted. And so it's do you, but at the same time, the children also need to know, right, that it's okay to grieve. It's okay to have days when you don't want to get out of bed, when you just cry, when it just seems, whether it's unfair or, so you basically, you took yourself away and self-healed all by yourself?
Pretty much, yeah. It all came back and hit me about 6-7 years after my husband died.
That much.
Where that's when I was busy.
Yeah.
I had my job. Work was what I did when life got rough. I would just bury myself in my work. I had various of my sons needed me.
Right.
For things like because of illness or whatever. I was traveling to take care of, the one in Colorado and the one in Virginia Beach. And, so things finally about 7 years after, they calmed down. And I was retiring. And suddenly I found that I'm not a wife. I'm not really a full-time mother. So what am I? And what is my identity now? And that was really hard for me. And that point comes for most of us, I think. But when it comes is different for everybody. Sometimes it's almost immediate. It's a part of that even initial grief. Sometimes it comes much later, like in my case.
Right.
And it's what we do with that.
Right.
I sunk into a depression. You mentioned not wanting to get out of bed. There were too many days I didn't want to get out of bed. Right. And when I did, all I did was move to the living room and sit in my recliner.
Just drag yourself. Yeah. Survival rather than living, right?
Yes. And I thought, it finally dawned on me one day. I was 60 years old and I said, I can't go on like this. I could live another 30 years. And is this going to be the way I want to live the rest of my life? Right. So I did a lot of soul searching. I tried a lot of different things to make myself happy. I tried different, not jobs, but like income things.
Yeah.
I direct sales and things like that.
Yeah.
And none of them really were right for me. Right. After I sunk a lot of money into it.
Oh dear. Yeah. But you tried, right? At least you were, there was a hope there. There was a desire to actually, create a different life. You weren't going to have the life that you had because life had taken him away from you, but that you had a choice to look for alternatives or even want to, because what I also hear, it's a bit like we were talking the other day about people, whether we've just had the earthquake in Morocco and the mudslide in Libya and all of that, and it's the survivor's guilt syndrome. And I've heard that people have that as well as widows, that you also feel that it's disrespectful or disloyal to actually have a life if your husband's, you know, I don't know, succumbed to illness or to an accident. Did you have that?
I've had widows tell me that they felt guilty the first time they laughed.
Right, exactly.
And my answer to them is, did he like your laugh?
Yeah.
Did he do things to make you laugh?
Right.
Well, then it's okay. You know,
Yeah.
if he loved your smile,
Yeah.
smile more. That's the way to honor.
Exactly.
To make a good life. My life now is totally different than I would have expected it to be. It's not when your spouse dies, doesn't matter whether you're man or woman, when your spouse dies, you don't lose just them, you lose the future you thought you were going to have with them.
Right.
And so you have to not only recreate your life as it is now, but you have to envision your future differently.
Yeah.
And you can do that from a space of mourning, or you can do it from a space of hope. And I chose to do it from hope. And it wasn't, I mean, things come together the way they're supposed to, I believe. And I heard somebody talking about being a life coach. And I thought, well, that's interesting. You know, I've kind of been a life coach for my children all their lives.
Yeah.
You know, because you give them not just advice, but, you know, how to.
Yeah.
And so I looked into it. And the very first certification course I saw was a life purpose coach.
Right.
I thought, that's what I need.
Yes.
I took the course and found out that I pretty much knew it all. I just hadn't put it together. And by the end of the course, I knew that my purpose was to help other women find their purpose.
Now, isn't that beautiful that you've taken something very sad and tragic? You know, you hadn't asked for your husband to pass at the young age of 54, and you had indeed imagined a different future for yourself and for your family. But then you've taken that and you've grown. I mean, I see the radiance on your face when you talk about your purpose and being there for others. And that's also the beauty of our age, is that we do want to give back. And it's, you know, you can either be a victim and be bitter about what happened. And as you say, go about recreating a life from a position of mourning, as in, okay, I'll do this, but this isn't what I wanted. This isn't what I planned. It's more, again, that survival, I think, that we were talking about, or from a position of life, of living. What can I, you know, Cindy, who was half of a couple, but, you know, he wasn't all of you, he was half of your couple, and then take him with you, if that's what you want to do as a widow, in everything that you do. And I'm very grateful for people who've also taken it that step further, and not just, you know, well-wishing. I'm actually a coach as well since 2009, mostly motivational coaching, but a lot of people did not to do accreditations and just thought, you know, as you said, at our age, we do know a lot of that, putting ourselves out the equation about listening, but still to actually do the accreditation is all to your honor, and also probably helps you reach more people, because it isn't a topic that we're used to. And widowhood does still have like a taboo around it. We're in an age where we're supposed to live to 100 and all of this. There is that. And then there's also the circumstances, right? Whether the other person's gone, whether it's an accident, or then things like suicide, which do add that extra weight to it in how you live it, and how you have to struggle very hard to not think that it's because you weren't enough, or because he didn't love you enough, or your children enough, and to see it as it was an illness, just like, you know, when somebody has cancer or whatever illness that they leave, you know, that they die from, that there as well, it is an illness, it's not rational. So you then set yourself up to find out everything you could in order to best help your clients. Though my heart goes very much to wanting to ask you, how can I best help my friend and all that? We have said that today the topic is about the message of hope. So it's about that phase when we're ready to consider, you know, when we've passed that survival moment that everybody goes through, your entire world has collapsed, it is shattered, you're cut to shreds, you're looking after your children and all of that. But there does come a moment, which in itself is a message of hope, where the wounds never leave, and I suppose we don't really want them
No.
to leave because that's the part that's left of the other person, but they heal enough for us to have that message of hope, to think about it. And what you also said resonated with me with that identity, because I've had quite a few episodes about, like the empty nester syndrome, or also relationships falling to shreds after the children have left, because there's suddenly that I've dedicated myself to the children for the past 25 years of my life, and actually, who are you, and do I actually like you, and do you like me? And then if when you lose your children, indeed a lot of us, even the working mums, we are still mums, so there's all that role which has disappeared. But if it then coincides with as well losing your partner, then, as you say, I'm not a wife of, I'm not a mother of. Who is Cindy Burns?
Yeah. And I am a firm believer, and this is how I go about helping others, is I'm a firm believer that the best way to manage grief, you can't get rid of it, you can't cure it, it's with you forever, but you can manage it so that the part of grief that's there is the love that you had for the person, and you're always going to miss them, but you're not going to ache all the time. And the best way to manage it is to find out who you are,
Right,
and then gain the confidence in who you are. And once you have those two things, then you can find your new purpose in life.
right. And discover a completely channel probably than you wouldn't have had before, and that can be very fulfilling. So that's what you went about to do. You went through your mourning part, so and a lot of that was mourning on your own and looking after your children and keeping busy. But then 7 years later, that other part, but who am I actually now? And what do I want to do with the rest of my life? That came up. You can't generalize, people are all different, but how long would you say it in general takes for women to get to the phase where they're no longer just trying to put their world together, but just to survive, right? That they can manage to get up in the morning without being, hit with this tsunami of raw grief and all the problems which go with it, sometimes financial, and the responsibility for the children and all that, but that they can get to this phase of looking forward with hope to what your life can be.
It's all different for everybody. A lot depends on who you are at your core. If you're normally a very positive person, then it will hopefully come sooner rather than later.
Right.
Everybody's grief is different, and it's different from each other, but it's also different from, like, my grief for my parents, for my mother, is different than my grief for my father, than my husband, than my cousin. Each instance of grief is different.
And you do have to go through it, right? There's no
Yeah.
point saying, I'm going to keep myself busy and I'm going to be positive and I'm going to rebuild my life. I think you have to go through it first, right? There's no escaping it.
You have to allow yourself to feel. The very first thing you should do when you're grieving is go ahead and feel your feelings. Name them. Try to put a name to them. I say call them Fred if you don't know what to call it.
Yeah.
The stages of grief, ignore them. They don't go in any kind of order. There are pieces of grief, like guilt is one of the first things. Oh, I should have done things differently. Or if it had been an accident or something, then you're guilty because maybe you didn't kiss him goodbye in the morning. Or suicide has terrible guilt associated with it. There are things like that you've got to work through. You can't just push it aside and say, like Scarlett O'Hara in Gone with the Wind, I'll worry about that tomorrow. You can't do that, because then everything comes at tomorrow. Everything comes.
And you need a foundation, right? You can't build your future on swampy ground, because underneath there's all this, unlooked at business.
And you don't have to grieve alone. That's the thing. You don't have to do it alone. Find a trusted friend, a family member, coach, a clergy person, anything, somebody
But something positive, because I had actually said to my friend, oh, look out for, you know, we can do the best. We can say, you know what, I don't actually know how you're feeling. I can just imagine that it must be awful. But why don't you reach out and find support groups, people who do really know how it feels? However, she had had two very bad experiences. One woman had said to us, you'll see it only gets worse. That's not the sort of message she wanted to hear. And the second one, I think, just cried solidly during the half hour that they were going to have a talk. And she was a bit like, well, this really isn't supporting me at all. So I suppose you have to be careful and know when to move away from the sort of environment that you're not looking for. And what you said about personality is also extremely important, because this friend of ours, this young widow, has a force of spirit which is absolutely amazing. I mean, she came round to see us not long ago, and I decided, you know, not to get made up, to just basically stay in my jeans and t-shirt, thinking I certainly don't want her to feel that, you know, I'm all. And she came in looking radiant, and I was like, my goodness, you look so beautiful. And she said, well, some days I just feel it's almost like a survival instinct. You know, I thought, okay, I'm going to come and see you. And then we did talk, and we did, you know, really talk about everything very honestly. But at the same time, there is a life force in her that you can already see now, 2 months later, even though she's battling with tremendous grief and questions and has her 3 children that she's very much wants to be there for as well. So, I mean, as you say, it does also depend, but you do need to grieve. So that's one thing. There's no point rushing around doing stuff thinking that you can cope with this, because it has to be lived, right?
Exactly. Now, from the other side, as a friend, one of the things you can do for your friend or family member or even acquaintance is ask them, do you want to talk about it?
Mm-hmm.
And they may say no and then go on and talk about it. Or they may say, thank you for asking. And they'll or they'll say, not right now. You know, this is it's too close. It all depends. Just be there for them. Don't say, call me and let me know what I can do. You call them and ask, would you like me to bring over dinner? If they've got young children, would you, you know, I'll babysit while you take a nap or go shopping.
The practical stuff as well, right?
Yes, just be there for them. Show up and say, you know, okay, you know, bring a bag of popcorn and say, okay, we're going to Netflix for a while, you know, if it's that kind of friendship where you can do that.
And it's being there all the time as well, because I think also what happens is that, you know, on the fleur of the moment, you know, everybody was shocked and there was a huge turnout in the church, and I can imagine she was actually totally overwhelmed with people who wanted to be there. But as you were saying, you know, sometimes people react differently than we expect, etc. But that it's to keep it also going, because it's not like, okay, well, there we are, we're all feeling better and got over the shock, but you know, what about them? So no, we will do that. Now let's get into the tips or suggestions that you would have for widows who are at the phase where they're starting to think about, okay, what now? So you said, first of all, look into who you are really, right? So really look into who you are. You know, find a coach. And you said that's when that's when you start to think about, what would I like to do? What would I like to be remembered for? And that sort of thing, right?
And who do I want to be? How do I want to
be
go up in the world? And you have to reconcile it with who you want to be with who you are at your core. Like, I want to be one of these free spirit, you know, type of people that just kind of comes up with wonderful ideas all the time, and you know, and is just a joy to be around all the time. But what I am is much more practical. I like to have a plan. I like to have a sense of control. And so, you know, who I want to be and who I am are not necessarily aligned. But
who I was told I was as well.
Definitely. You've really got to look into that. You've got to look into your past and your present and your future and figure out, okay, who is this person? And do I love her? And if you don't love her, what can you do to bring out that love? You know, what needs to change for you to love her? And that once you've got that, then you have to start thinking about stepping outside your comfort zone a little bit at a time. and that builds your confidence. And once you know who you are, and once you have the confidence in who you are, your purpose will probably show up during all of this. If it doesn't, there are things you can do to learn your particular purpose.
And recognize the signs, right? To just
exactly.
Yeah.
You've got to trust what's in your gut and what's in your heart. And if they're not aligned, then that's not for you. It's not to say it's wrong. It's just not really what it is you're supposed to be doing with your life.
It's wonderful for people to know that they have this sort of resource. So you actually also coach, right, Cindy?
Oh, yes, yes.
So you coach online, face to face? Well, how do you coach?
I coach, so far it's all been online. I have a new program that I'm going to be starting on October 2nd, which I'm really excited about. It's what I've done privately, but this time I'm offering it
Well done.
as a group thing. So I'm really excited about the format of it. And I have not done face-to-face yet. I'm looking to.
Right.
I really would
Yeah, and
love
I mean, some people, I remember when I started coaching, I remember thinking, I will never do, anything over Skype. It was in those days, we're about 2007 or something. And then I realized that actually online offers a lot of freedom to say things that sometimes we don't say when we're close to people. And as a coach as well, a lot less distractions. We're then completely in there with them. So thank you for being here, Cindy. I will make sure to put your new program, and we're talking about October 2023 for people who listen to the episode at any time out of my archive, how to get hold of you and where your program is, so that you can help more people. And I'm just very grateful that there is this sort of resource, and that you created this out of your own wish, that you had something like that to help you through widowhood, and to help you get to the point where you remember your husband or partner with a lot of love, and bring him with you, but in a vibrant new life full of purpose. Right.
Thank you so much for having me.
It was a real pleasure, Cindy. Thank you very much for sharing with us. It's not an easy topic. For the rest of you out there, she's there, and there are people like that out there. I'll put there's a Facebook group that Cindy mentions in there, so have a look at her show notes as well for any support you can get, and ask for it and name those feelings. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel. Please leave me a review on iTunes and help me share the message, so that together we can really embrace these moments of life and be all that we're meant to be. All the best to all of you. Thank you, Cindy. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.